Sure, no problem at all, of course. Okay, yeah, we've got one more question for you.
Hiya, thank you for giving the talk. I was just wondering, as someone who's heavily influenced by your ideas about speciesism, how can we avoid sort of committing that in terms of, like, in your opinion, how much should we be giving to animal charities and saving animal lives?
Well, I'm concerned to give where it's effective, and I'm concerned to reduce suffering, whether it's human suffering or animal suffering. So, I've focused today on what I've been talking about on reducing human suffering, but I'm very much concerned about reducing the suffering of animals, and if you know of effective organisations that you think can use more funds effectively in order to do that, I certainly think that that's a very good thing to do. As I've said, in some cases, these two things go in harmony. So, trying to get people to eat less meat or to go even further and follow a vegan diet is not only good for animals, it's actually good for the environment, and therefore it's good for the global poor as well. Thank you.
Well, I guess that just demonstrates the interconnectedness of all these moral issues. Okay.
It doesn't, I think it connects with what I said right at the beginning, that there is a movement for people to live more ethically in different ways. We may not all agree with every one of these ethical ways, but I think what's really significant is the extent to which people are getting more involved in saying, what does it take to live an ethical life, and why I want to do it, and I think more people should be doing it.
Great stuff. Okay, so before we let you go, I'd just like to thank you once again. Hope everyone else is well. Thanks very much for being here.
Nice to see you. I'm sorry, I guess you were not able to see me. Is that right?
But we can see you on the screen, but I couldn't get it up on the big screen behind, unfortunately. Okay. Well, thanks very much.
Good. Okay. Bye.
Bye. Okay, well that was unique.
I'd just like to point out this is tap water. This is in fact tap water. I've been using this bottle for years.
Okay. So before we move to the next speaker, we've been in here for quite a while, so I'd just like to offer a 5-minute toilet break.
Do you want to tell us where the toilets are?
I don't actually know where the toilets are.
Down the hall and to the left, there'll be either male or female, and then one floor up, same place, either male or female.
Perfect.
So you could just come back by about 5 to 3, that would be great, because we've got one more speaker, it's really good.
And I've got someone in the water, but you don't have to save him because he's getting schistosomiasis.
Still rolling. Yeah. Yeah, well, we wasn't all sort of
Oh, yeah.
the frontline artists is like something like hot things. I guess I would try to have the slides yeah, Well, I think yeah, exactly.
Yeah, they did That was very interesting. You go home and sleep in your own bed at night. Holly designed that form.
Hi, there we go.
Yeah.
What do you have to say? Biology's good. He actually knows what to do with the substance. Right down
Has everyone got one of these?
Yeah. It is. What I said is true. Well, it's amazing.
Yeah, sure. You want to introduce
Welcome back, everyone. Just have attention. So this is our third and final speaker of the day. He is the director of Schistosomiasis Control Initiative, which is one of Giving What We Can's top recommended charities. So it's my pleasure to introduce Professor Alan Fennick.
Thank you. Thanks. So I'm going to give you, I hope it's all right, a little bit of a biology lesson and just show you some of the horrible consequences of diseases which we can actually treat incredibly inexpensively. So, let's see how this works. I was hoping that maybe that one would work. Can you use page down? Okay, so basically the organisation I work for concentrates on a group of neglected tropical diseases. Now in the year 2000 there were only 3 neglected tropical diseases, One was malaria, one was HIV, and then one was TB. Today, those three diseases are incredibly not neglected, and hundreds of billions of dollars go into treatment and trying to save the lives that those diseases take away. Now these 13 diseases on this list, and the ones in red are the ones that I'm going to concentrate on today, because they are the ones on which I spend any money which is donated as a result of the recommendations both of GiveWell in the United States and Giving what we can here in the UK. I was approached by Toby and his colleague Will Crouch when they were setting up Giving What We Can, not realizing that I was being evaluated as a charity, and then when they invited me along at their very first launch in October, I was very proud to see that they had made us a recommendation, and I certainly, whenever I possibly can, move around and speak at launches to show my appreciation. So who are these people? 1 in 6 of the world's population has been mentioned who live in poverty and basically live on less than £1 a day or less than $2 a day, as Peter said. The problem is these people are caught in a vicious circle. They suffer from parasitic infections which afflict these poorest people, make them disabled, disfigured, but it promotes a cycle of poverty because the people who have the parasites don't have the energy and the wherewithal to climb out of that poverty trap. You heard mention of Jeffrey Sachs, who was responsible, not individually I'm sure, but certainly partly responsible for the United Nations Millennium Development Goals, and the arguments we use are that if we can get rid of these parasitic diseases, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about today, we're not going to achieve the Millennium Development Goals. But my argument is we'll never achieve the Millennium Development Goals unless we get rid of these other diseases. We'll never eradicate extreme poverty and hunger, while 1 in 6 of the world's population have worms in their bellies that eat the food, and they don't get very much food. They eat the food and get the nutrition before that nutrition can benefit the human being. We'll never achieve universally primary education while children are too hungry and undernourished to actually go to school. And if they do get to school, are too tired to concentrate. We will never reduce child mortality and improve maternal health while the effects of these worms on women of childbearing age is that they suffer from anemia, because the greatest cause of a poor birth outcome is anemia. And number 6, there we are. We've got combat HIV, AIDS, malaria, and the NTDs, the neglected tropical diseases, are included in this throwaway line of the other diseases. So I'm just going to give you a few interesting facts about 1 or 2 of them. As the organisation I work for is called Schistosomiasis, which is also bilharzia for those who didn't necessarily know the name. That's one of the problems of the neglected tropical diseases. They all have names that no one can pronounce or spell. And I travel around from medical school to medical school in the UK, hoping that doctors, when graduated, may not know the life cycle of schistosomiasis, but at least they've heard of it. 5 species, 2 dominate in Africa, endemic in 70. It's very much, all these diseases are very much tropical, and it's chronic and debilitating. It affects mostly the poorest of the poor. There is an exception. I don't suppose many of you here are from Scotland and are avid readers of the Daily Record, which I think is about 3 times worse than the Sun. But nevertheless, if there's a good story, they've got it. And here, back in 2004, they had this story that Prince William was hit by a rare tropical disease. It turns out that when he and Kate went to Kenya, they swam in one of the ponds there, and he came back with schistosomiasis. I wrote to him and I pointed out to him, dear Prince William, it may be rare among princes, but actually it's not that rare because there are 200 million people in Africa who are infected with this disease. And I got a very nice letter back saying that he was happy that he'd been treated so quickly. So schistosomiasis, and this gentleman is a very severe sufferer from schistosomiasis, as I say, affects 200 million people. And 85% of them or more are in sub-Saharan Africa. Now, not all of them are at any one time suffering from the symptoms, and that's one of the things that we have to do. We have to be proactive, because the children get infected, but they don't suffer for another 10 or 15 years, and so they won't seek treatment. We've got to take the treatment to the schools, and we've got to treat the school-aged children. Does it kill? Yes, it does, but it kills 20 years after people have been infected, and there's an estimate that it kills 280,000 people every year. We don't know the answer to that. It may be many, many more. It probably certainly isn't less. But if someone dies of liver failure, they don't say, oh, you died of schistosomiasis that you got 20 years earlier. You're down as dying of liver failure. Now here's the boy in the pond, and I think we should save him by taking him out of the pond, because while he's in the pond, he can be attacked by a larva of schistosomiasis which has come out of a snail, and that larva can then go through the human body, goes through unbroken skin, and can form a centimetre-long worm which lives in the blood. The male and female worms live together, and the female worms give birth or lay these eggs. Now, in order for the cycle to be completed, the eggs have got to get out of the human body. So how do they do that? They're in the bloodstream. And they're swept around the bloodstream, and with this rather splendid spine they have here, they burst open capillary tubes rather like a tin opener, and they get through either into the intestine or into the bladder. And every time they go through a capillary tube, they take with them a drop of blood. And so, as you can imagine, if somebody has 100 worms inside them, and those worms lay 300 eggs a day, there's an awful lot of blood which is given away. Unfortunately, only about half of those eggs actually get out of the human body. And the ones that don't get out of the human body do even more damage, because they get swept to the liver and they've nowhere to go. It's rather like a car filter collecting sand out of the petrol. The pump is pumping away as hard as it can, and that's your heart. But if your filter is blocked, something has got to give. And in the case of schistosomiasis and liver hypertension, it's the blood vessels around the esophagus. And at the age of 35, for no apparent reason, a man will open his mouth and bleed to death. So it does kill, but it takes 20 years to do so. Urine. Can you imagine if any of your children, when you admit to them, have blood in the urine like this? You'd rush them to A&E. The doctors in A&E in the UK wouldn't have a clue what has caused this. And yet, in Africa, in rural Africa, up to 80% of school-aged children have urine looking like that. And this is a photo I took in Niger of 3 poor little waifs who are at school, and they were asked to produce a little urine. We gave them a pill which cost 20 cents, and within a week, their urine was clear and remained clear if they didn't get infected again. In Uganda, this is a photograph which is often shown by many people because this really is an extreme case, and the chances are that this actually man, although he looks like a boy of about 24 years old, actually the guy who took the photo sitting down in front of me, did not live for very much longer. Now, that's one of the diseases. The next one is just ordinary worms. And look at the numbers. Almost 1 billion people, that's 1 in 6, as I said, of the population of the Earth, are infected with not one or the other. Ascaris, which are roundworms, Trachoma and hookworm, all of which consume food before it gets to be nourishing to the human being who's got the worms, and in extreme cases they cause stunting and they cause blood loss and anemia. Of course, an awful lot of people have a few worms and it doesn't do them that much harm, but this poor little girl had a stomach full of worms, and so we treated her. We treated her with a tablet of albendazole, which costs 1 penny from a generic company in India, and out came a barrel of worms. Now, there is absolutely no reason why any school child should have worms like that when we can treat them for a penny. Incidentally, these drugs are the same drugs that we use to deworm our cats and dogs. And I'm not quite sure how many of you have got cats and dogs, but my guess is that if you do have, or your parents have, you will pay £20 a year to deworm your cats and dogs. Now, we've done a little bit of advocacy to the pharmaceutical companies, and they have now agreed that they're not going to even charge us a penny to deworm the school-aged children in Africa. They're happy to charge the $20 or £20 to deworm the dogs, so they take that money and they now give us 400 million tablets a year to deworm free of charge all the school-aged children in Africa. And this is the result of those people who have too many worms, and the proof that if we can get them a pill quickly enough, they will recover and rejoin the growth curve. If they're not treated within 3 years, they'll end up stunted and they can never recover from that. So it's so important that we get the drugs out quickly. And treating school children is easy. I mean, you know, we line the children up, it's a tasteless pill, we give them one pill, and we only have to treat them once a year, maybe twice a year in very heavily infected areas. And for schistosomiasis as well, only once a year. One other worm I want to tell you about is a Malaria worm called Lymphatic Filariasis. And this is really the most horrible disease. It gives massive disfigurement, as you can see this lady. What happens is the adult worms collect in the lymph glands, and this stops the draining of the lymph from the legs and the scrotum and other parts of the body, which leads to massive swellings and secondary infections. And there's something like 120 million people globally have this, and 40 million who are suffering these sort of symptoms. We can break the transmission of this disease with a drug which is donated free of charge, and it costs us less than 50 cents or 25 pence to deliver this drug. And we only have to treat people once a year for 6 years. So we are headed for elimination of transmission. And globally, we are currently treating 700 million people. There are 700 million people every year who take the 2 tablets that will stop the transmission of this disease. Sadly, there are another 300 million that we haven't yet reached, and that's why we're always looking for more support. But what about those people who've got those horrible symptoms? These pills will not actually help them that much. And so we've got to do other things. Washing those legs with soap and water twice a day is all that's needed. And yet nobody knew until about 4 years ago. And now, with washing with soap and water, within 3 months, the secondary infection is gotten rid of, and the legs will shrink back, not quite to normal, but pretty much so. And then if we keep giving them pills, after a period of 5 years, the worms die naturally, and then they can get back to normal. But for men, and for those of you who are ladies in the room, it's not a pretty picture, but you're lucky enough that you'll never suffer like this. In Niger, we have 8,000 men who look like that, who are in a queue in order to be operated on. And we can operate on them for just $100. We have camps, but we can only manage to do about 600 or 700 a year. But if we can operate on them within 2 weeks, they can become virtually normal, and as you can see, a smiley face was the result. And so we have a lot of these camps going on. We want to do it again in Burkina Faso, we want to do it in Uganda, and we want to do it in Tanzania. But for some reason, and I find it quite hard to believe, I would have thought people would rather donate to that sort of operation. But we've only found one group of Rotary clubs in America who have combined to give us money. And we've had about $200,000 donated over a 5-year period. So we are able to do some of these surgeries, but not nearly enough. The next disease is blinding trachoma, which is caused by a chlamydia infection, which is carried by flies. Now, you wouldn't believe, would you, that children could get used to having these flies crawling all over their faces, but they do, because they don't have water to wash. And so the dirt on their faces, and particularly the excretions around the eyes, attract the flies. Chlamydia infections lead to conjunctivitis. As a result of conjunctivitis, the eyelids scar, and when they stops being scarred, eyelashes, instead of going up, go down. They scratch the cornea, and the person goes blind. I mean, it is so senseless, so easy to prevent. And now we have a drug which we can give to these children once a year, and all that infection will be prevented. All we need is the 50 cents per person per year to deliver those free drugs. One more that I'm going to show you, because it gives me just an opportunity to take a little rest, is Guinea worm, which is a fascinating parasite. Only humans are infected. The intermediate host are little water fleas in ponds. So if people only have ponds to drink out of, and they swallow one of these water fleas, out pops a worm, which takes a year to grow to 1 meter in length, and it wanders around the human body for a year. And then when it's ready, when the female is gravid, she forms an ulcer on the leg, which burns like hell. So what does the person do? Runs to the nearest water to cool it down, and out come all the eggs, which infect the larvae again. If people had filtered water or tap water, there would be no guinea worm in the world. 10 years ago, there were 5 million cases. This year, less than 1,000. So we have done a great job on advocacy, on killing the larvae with insecticide, and having people get filtered water. Of those 1,000 worms that are left in the world, 995 of them are in southern Sudan. If you don't have good governance, if you don't have a peaceful government, you're never going to get good health. But we're working on it. And this is just to give me 20 seconds rest to show you what the worm looks like. When you find an infection, and there are notices all over rural areas in Africa, you have to rush to a health centre, and the medic, or even the person in the village who knows about it, will tie the end of the worm round a matchstick and slowly but surely pull it out. This is a very rare film now. There's only 997 left in Sudan and 3 elsewhere. Chad, and they found 1 case in Ethiopia this year, much to the disappointment of the Ethiopian government, who thought that they'd actually eliminated it. And the problem is, when you find 1 case, you have to wait a whole year to know whether or not another 500 people have been infected as a result. You've got to be very careful that you don't snap the worm, because obviously if you do, like that, if you do, then what's left behind could go septic. But fortunately, as you can see, we've got 1 meter of worm out of this person in Ghana. When I took that, I had President Carter standing behind watching. He was quite horrified. Now, I've mentioned that treatments were available for some of these diseases, and there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 sets of drugs, all of which are donated by the pharmaceutical industry. Now, most people think of the pharmaceutical industry as the real bad guys, out to make money, out to make huge profits for their shareholders. And yes, if they didn't, they wouldn't be able to do what they do for us. But what they do for us is donate. And the Hall of Fame, Merck, which is an American company, in 1985-86, they found that if individuals who are likely to get river blindness, which because of time I haven't shown you, their drug Mectizan, which they used for veterinary purposes, would actually sterilize the Schistosomiasis, as it's called, the onchocerca worm, which causes river blindness. Now, this worm gives birth to live larvae which go around the skin, waiting to be picked up by a biting fly. It causes the most unbearable itching. But worse than that, these larvae have a habit of crossing the retina. And when they cross the retina, they destroy the retina. 60 years ago, in Burkina Faso, in every village on the banks of a river, 50% of everybody over the age of 35 was blind. And this was the same all across West Africa, on the banks of the big rivers. In the 1970s, all those rivers were sprayed with DDT twice a year to kill the black fly. And then Mectizan was found. And since then, 100 million people every year have taken a dose of Mectizan, which has sterilized the worm, so immediately stopped the itching. And today, I think it's fair to say virtually nobody goes blind in Africa due to this worm. It's the most incredible success story. GlaxoSmithKline donates albendazole, which when partnered with Mectizan will also stop this lymphatic filariasis, the horrible deformity that I showed you. And albendazole also deworms. And so it's a bit of a wonder drug, really. GlaxoSmithKline have built a factory in South Africa which produces 1 billion tablets a year. And they give those to NGOs like ourselves, through the WHO, to the governments, so that everybody who lives in an area where there's lymphatic filariasis can take an albendazole tablet, and every school child in Africa is now dewormed once a year, free of charge, as far as the drugs are concerned. And all we need to do is to collect the 20 cents, 25 cents it takes to deliver the drugs, train the teachers, deliver the distribute the drugs to the end users, explain to the kids and their parents what it's all about, and then evaluate the coverage afterwards. Another pharmaceutical company, Johnson & Johnson, also donates 200 million tablets a year as from this year, and they're used for deworming preschool age children. So those worms, which the figures I gave you of nearly 1 billion of each of the 3 worms being distributed globally, these should come down like a rocket, and we're really hoping that by 2020 that's a target being set for a very heavy reduction in the number of people. The pharmaceutical company Pfizer donates the drug azithromycin, which is used for trachoma. Novartis donate multi-drug therapy for leprosy, which again is a disease I haven't mentioned because of time. SI donate a drug which is used in the Far East against lymphatic filariasis. And Medpharm and Merck have started donating the praziquantel that I need to treat schistosomiasis. At the moment we have 20 million tablets a year donated, which is enough to treat 6 million children. But there are 200 million people infected, and so we have to buy a lot of the drug. But over the next 3 or 4 years, Merck, which is another company but based in Germany, have agreed to upscale their donation from 20 million tablets to 250 million tablets, providing that we will take those tablets and make sure they're delivered. SCI, you've heard us mentioned. It's not just me. We have a group of people. We have with different skill sets. We have a statistician, a health economist, a mathematical modeler, and we have program managers who are allocated each of the 12 countries in which we work. And this gentleman down here, Narcissus, is based in Uganda.